I'm coming before you guys today just to let you know that we have our suspicions, but I don't know why I've been targeted, why I've been set up, or charged with this heinous crime. I am not guilty.
It is quite the murder mystery. A Florida wife accused of murdering her husband and burying his body, but could her young daughter actually be the killer? What about someone else? We'll break down the details of this case and discuss it all with the defendant's own attorney, who has some shocking allegations for us. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. We got a really different case for you right now out of Lake County, Florida, and it concerns 41-year-old Laurie Shaver. She is accused of murdering her former husband, Michael, and then burying his body in the backyard. Now, this case has a lot of twists, and in a little bit I'm going to play you what I will say is my surprising interview with Laurie's attorney, Jeffrey Wiggs, because he revealed some very, very interesting information regarding a possible defense. But before we go there, Laurie Shaver, she is currently charged with murder in the second degree with a firearm and accessory after the fact. This is out in Lake County, Florida. And by the way, her felony charges, they show up on TruthFinder. Yeah, so when we ran a check on her, we typed in Shaver's name, age, state of residence, and in less than a minute, our paid subscription gave us access to court records, including her felony charges and a citation for speeding that dates back to 2015. Yet Law&Crime partners with TruthFinder, and we use it to get details of the people involved in our stories. But even if you don't work in true crime, TruthFinder could just be an excellent resource to give you some peace of mind. It's one of the largest public records search services in the United States. And with a paid subscription service, you can get access to unlimited reports about almost anyone. And right now, you can get 50% off of your first month of confidential background reports. Just go to truthfinder.com/LC Sidebar. Hope you can check it out. Now, according to an affidavit of probable cause that was filed back in 2020, police are called to the Shaver's home back in February of 2018. This was a welfare check on Michael because it turns out a friend, Scott Amatuccio, called the police saying no one had heard from Michael in 3 years, since the end of 2015. And this friend said that Laurie was possibly not telling the truth about Michael. The probable cause affidavit reads, quote, Laurie vaguely claimed Michael left in a black SUV, yet Scott knew his possessions to still be at the home afterwards. Scott found the text messages to Michael's boss quitting his job and giving away his tools to be unlike him. Scott believed Laurie was pretending to be Michael on his Facebook. Scott also thought the concrete slab/fire pit that appeared on the property after Michael's disappearance, along with Laurie quickly remarrying, was suspicious. Scott consulted with Michael's family, who also agreed he would never leave his kids to start a new family, as Laurie claimed he had. It goes on to say, quote, while investigating the well-being check, defendant Laurie Shaver told deputies Michael left the family and was in Georgia. She said the last time Michael was at their house was when he picked up his belongings after his arrest for domestic violence in September 2014, and the last time she saw him was during a DCF custody trial in 2015. Then the documents go on to explain how Laurie was cooperative with law enforcement, but then suddenly told deputies to leave the property when they asked about that concrete slab fire pit and asked if they could have a cadaver dog sniff around there. And yes, authorities ended up determining Michael's gone. No current cell phone, his license and passport expired, his car was repossessed, no one had seen him since 2015. There's this line too I want to mention, quote, during the missing person investigation, Travis Filmer, Laurie Shaver's boyfriend, who she began dating in approximately January, April 2016, told deputies that Laurie made the statement about Michael Shaver that, quote, it's not that he's missing, he's no longer walking this earth. Laurie also told him regarding Michael that something bad had happened and there was a body on the property. Talking about him for a second, there's this too. Laurie told her boyfriend Travis Filmer that she was divorced and married him even though her marriage to Michael was still valid. And when questioned by her sister-in-law about her divorce, she stated it was final and that Michael was at the courthouse with her for the hearing in a separate room. So then we fast forward to March 9th, 2018, and pursuant to a search warrant, authorities find Michael's body. They find his skeletal remains underneath that concrete slab and fire pit. Quote, also removed from around his body was a tarp, a set of ratchet straps, and the remains of a fitted sheet. The tags indicate the sheet was queen size and purchased at Kohl's, a department store frequented by Laurie Shaver, as proven by her bank records. The remains were confirmed to be those of Michael Shaver by DNA. Michael Shaver's cause and manner of death is homicide by gunshot wound to the back of the head with a posterior to anterior trajectory, meaning back to front. A single .38 caliber class projectile was recovered from Mr. Shaver's skull. They also apparently found the possible presence of blood in the track of the sliding glass door that was leading from the dining area to the porch of the home as well. So law enforcement, they came up with a timeline here. They believe that Michael was killed between November 7th, 2015, that's the last day that he was seen, and November 10th, 2015, that's the first day that he didn't show up to work.
On November 11th, Laurie sent a private message via a work server to Alicia Ray, her sister, stating, Mike left yesterday, packed his stuff, and went to the airport.
On approximately November 12th, John Borglum texted Michael and received the response, I'm having issues at home in Georgia right now. Just fire me or I'll quit. I will not be returning anytime soon. Frank Merritt went to the Shaver home on November 13th to check on him, and Laurie told him that Michael left and went to Georgia after they got into a fight about another woman's number being in his phone. And then there's this, quote, beginning on November 9th, 2015, friends and family of Michael Shaver, to include Robert Mercado, Frank Merritt, and his boss, John Borglum, received texts and Facebook messages from Michael. These texts and Facebook messages were unlike Michael in tone. For example, telling his boss to go ahead and fire him because he wouldn't be coming back to work. Or how about this? In September of 2016, Desiree Snyder, this is Michael's niece, sent a Facebook message to Michael and received the reply, who are you? And I don't have a family anymore. I have no clue who you are. Now stop messaging me. Think about that. Michael's family points out that Laurie would not have recognized Desiree's maiden name. Michael obviously would. So again, goes to this idea, was she impersonating him? So you can see the evidence that is building up against Laurie, right? Didn't even talk about the finances yet. How about this? After November 9th, 2015, Michael Shaver's debit card never used again for any in-person store purchases. But then on November 19th and again on November 23rd, 2015, two separate online purchases are made at wish.com using his debit card. And it is confirmed through wish.com receipts that these purchases consisted of female lingerie and clothing items and were both shipped, you guessed it, to Laurie Shaver at the Shaver residence. There were also allegations that someone was depositing checks into his account and withdrawing money, and that she made a fraudulent loan deposit in his name, that Laurie was selling and attempting to sell Michael's guns, tools, car, possessions. And now I want to talk about a guy named Jeremy Townsend. So Jeremy Townsend was interviewed and stated that he began dating Laurie Shaver in approximately September of 2015 after she told him she had left her husband. Now, the first time that Jeremy came to Laurie's home in approximately December, he noticed what he thought was blood stains on the thigh of her jeans. And he asked her if that was blood on her jeans. Laurie changed the jeans, never wore them again. Jeremy remarked that prior to that, Laurie wore those jeans 3 times per week, but he never saw them again. Quote, beginning in February 2016 and for several months, Jeremy Townsend's wife, Vanessa, received Facebook messages from Michael Shaver's account and then text messages from someone claiming to be Michael. The Facebook messages went unread until April when she received a flower delivery at work with the message, roses are red, violets are blue, my wife is a whore, your husband is too. Check your Facebook message, we need to talk, Mike. And then it goes on to state, quote, these messages and photographs were solely intended to notify Vanessa of the affair between Jeremy and Laurie to encourage Vanessa to leave Jeremy. A friend of the Shavers, Mary Lunenberg, showed detectives a text message between herself and Michael that read, Michael, where he says, she wants my life insurance, referring to Laurie Shaver. Mary replies, she's got to kill you first. Michael replied, she tried to yesterday, I'm sure. Now, Mary was unable to remember the exact date of the text due to it being saved on an old phone, but stated that it was 2014 or 2015. And I have another incident I want to discuss. Quote, Laurie Shaver was known to keep a pink .38 caliber handgun on her nightstand. On September 4th, 2014, she retrieved this revolver from her nightstand and used it during the domestic violence incident in which she hit Michael in the head with the gun, causing a laceration. Michael was arrested for simple battery domestic. By the way, in the arrest affidavit from that specific incident, there was one particularly alarming line that read, quote, Michael stated that Laurie retrieved her Cobra revolver out of her nightstand and stated she was going to end it now. Well, going back to our probable cause affidavit that we're talking about in Laurie's case, it reads, in approximately October 2017, Laurie sold a pink .38 caliber handgun to a neighbor, Robert Kaya, who later turned it over to the LCSO. This handgun has been forensically compared to the .38 caliber class projectile recovered from Michael Shaver's skull and was unable to be included or excluded as being the weapon that killed Mr. Shaver. Of course, the question becomes, was she trying to get rid of it? So with all of that, Laurie Shaver, Laurie Firmer, is ultimately arrested in 2020, and she's charged with second-degree murder, domestic violence, accessory after the fact. Now, her trial is supposed to start next month, but the defense has a bombshell. In a filing last year, they claim that the couple's daughter, who was 7 or 8 years old back in 2015, she was the one who shot and killed Michael. Yes, that she confessed this when she was 14 years old. The state has countered that, saying, quote, factually, that evidence is going to be debunked by the simple facts of the case and that her story is just not credible. And it seems, based on a recently filed motion, they want to try to limit what the defense can argue in a trial. In a recently filed motion in limine, these are pretrial motions to limit evidence from being introduced at a trial, the state says, quote, in the instant case, there is no claim nor evidence that the decision to charge defendant and not to charge others with these crimes arose out of any impermissible motive such as race, religion, or gender discrimination. Whether or not another person should also be charged or why there was a delay in the prosecution filing a specific charge in no way tends to prove or disprove defendant's guilt and therefore is irrelevant. Defendant should not be permitted to argue either directly or indirectly that another person should also have been charged with these crimes or elicit testimony or advance argument regarding the delay in charging Laurie Shaver. Okay, a lot to process there, right? So with all of that, I had an opportunity to sit down with Laurie's attorney, Jeffrey Wiggs, and I wanted to sort out this development and the state's argument and try to make sense of what we can expect at trial. But as you will see, he hit us with another bombshell about who may be responsible for Michael's death. Jeffrey, thank you so much for coming here on Sidebar. Let me just start off. How is your client doing right now?
Client's well. The client's well. She's working every day, healthy. Of course, a little nervous about her trial coming up.
Yeah. And by the way, how were you brought onto the case?
I've just been around a long, long time. And so Laurie knew probably who I was within the community.
Yep.
Just contacted me when things happen.
It's a good thing for a lawyer to say. I've been around a long time. That means you built up a great reputation, and so I can hear that. I do want to ask you, though, because there's a lot of questions, and I think the number one question that I had when I was researching this case, and I think a lot of people would have, why was Laurie charged so many years after Michael's death?
Well, I don't know when. The state has never established a date of death on this case. They've reached kind of presumptions when they believe that Michael died. They don't really have a firm date of death. So it's kind of speculative on their end as to specifically when Michael even died.
I guess the question would be, well, there was activity in 2018, and yet your client wasn't charged till 2020, right? So do you know what was happening in between those 2 years?
Well, there was law enforcement received some well-being check, went out to the residence, looked around, later came back with a warrant to search the property. At that time, they located a body and then left and then started trying to piece it onto Miss Shaver, saying she did it. There's a lot of facts behind this story that we tried to explain to the state, just kind of got shoved out the door.
Let's analyze that a bit, because here's the big one. The evidence that, and the defense you're putting forward, is that Laurie and Michael's daughter is the one who is responsible for killing Michael. And my understanding is she wants to testify, right? But the state is trying to block that from happening. If you can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, what happened is Laurie came in and confided to me, spoke to me about the events of the case, what had transpired. She obviously didn't want to involve anybody else in the matter. And the daughter, speaking through somebody else, persisted in pushing her mom to let her be involved in this thing, let her testify. So Laurie eventually gave in. And we then, first thing I did is I sat down with the daughter, just asked her a couple preliminary questions to see if everything lined up, so to speak. And when I could tell it did, we moved the court, asked for a attorney ad litem to be appointed on behalf of the daughter. That attorney was appointed. It's Kelly Johnson. Kelly sat and has met with the daughter, spoken to her, gone over the rights that she'd be waiving by testifying. Kelly, discerned that her testimony would be free and voluntary and she'd understand the rights that she's waiving. We then approached the state attorney's office to let them know there were some facts that the state was not aware of that the state should be apprised of. And that is, at the time of this death, Laurie was dating another individual. This individual was present within the residence at the demise of Michael Shaver, that he had entered the residence and Laurie had been beaten up, was on the floor. The minor child had been involved at that stage to some extent. And we don't know precisely, if that minor child had actually provided the fatal shot to Michael at that stage. But this other individual that she was dating had taken the gun and fired a shot into Michael. So we went to the state and we told them, hey, there's facts you're not aware of. We want to cooperate with you. We want you to listen to us. And we want you to listen to this minor child as well. Well, basically, I was just shown the door, told there's the door. We'll see you in court. So the state never really wanted to investigate the case, never spoke to the daughter, never did any additional research into the issue. And so here we are. We're just stuck now going to trial.
Well, why do you think the state did that? Because if you ask the state, right, they're going to say the evidence lines up with your client being the one who killed Michael,
Right.
not your daughter,
Right.
not her daughter, not this other individual. Why do they say that? Why are they so confident in this evidence that your client did it?
The state will take a position. That position is usually lined up with whatever law enforcement brings them. If they fix a position, they usually don't want to be arguing with law enforcement. They want to just go down the garden path and say, hey, this is what they're telling us. Let's go in and try to sell it. They don't want to go back to law enforcement and say, hey, maybe you guys made a decision that's not the appropriate one to make. Maybe we need to look at this and look at that. So they don't want to fight with their own team, so to speak. So that's where we're at. It's just really a lack of investigation all the way through it.
Where's the court on this at this point, at the time of this recording?
Well, the judge doesn't involve himself in it. The judge he's just going to deal with it as it appears in trial.
But is Laurie's daughter going to be able to testify and explain this side of the story to the jury?
Yes.
She's permitted to testify.
She will testify. Yes.
And the big question would be, just going back to it, you don't have an idea of when exactly this event occurred, right? And my understanding is, why would this young girl, when she was so young, why would she allegedly open fire and kill her father?
Okay. Laurie had been through years of physical abuse by Mr. Shaver. I mean, this had gone on for years and years. There's incident reports. Laurie had gone down, filed petitions for injunctive relief to keep him away from her. Mr. Shaver had been prosecuted for battery. There had been DCF reports. This was an ongoing event. Mr. Shaver had done some really, really improper things over the course of this marriage. And this child had witnessed it. This family lived really in a state of turmoil with Michael. And there's plenty of evidence out there to demonstrate this. Now, the court is not going to get tied up with, array of all these incidents. But to an extent, some of this will come out in the trial. I think some of it has to come out.
I think a fair question could be, and maybe one that the jury will have to struggle with, is if this is true, and you have a 7-year-old who maybe was protecting her mother, why wouldn't Laurie just tell police at the moment? The daughter probably would, there's a strong chance, wouldn't have been charged. And your client, maybe she could have been charged with respect to not properly securing the weapon, but she wouldn't be charged right now with killing her husband. So I guess the question is, and the jury will ask, and will ask themselves, why didn't she just come clean and say what was really happened? I understand a mother wants to protect her daughter, but the circumstances could be understandable, no?
Yeah, well, what had happened is this boyfriend at that time had come in and shot Mr. Shaver and even threatened the family. Told them, look, I'll take care of this. You get these kids out of here. Laurie left with the children and came back, and the body was gone. There was no more talk about it. And that was that. I think Laurie was at peace with the fact that Mr. Shaver was out of her life and didn't want to draw any more attention to, what had happened.
In other words, she is pleading not guilty even with respect to hiding the body. She doesn't know what happened until law enforcement discovered the body. That's the narrative.
Yeah, she didn't have anything to do with the body. Mr. Townsend had removed the body. She returned home. The body was gone. She had reason to believe he had taken the body off-site to a different property, is what was communicated to me, and just had no reason to assume anything had transpired other than that.
Is he going to be called as a witness, Mr. Townsend?
Well, Mr. Townsend?
Yeah.
I presume he will. I believe the state will probably need him to set up some kind of timeline for the state. I have questions for him. I've tried to subpoena him. I haven't gotten a return of service on him. I don't know if he's evading service or what he's doing, but yeah, we've tried to subpoena him at this stage.
Because he sounds like the critical witness to your defense, right?
Well, you would hope so. His position is, in his deposition was that he barely knew Laurie and knew her basically for a few days, something to that extent. And minor child was deposed by the state, and her testimony was quite different. Yeah.
Do you think it's going to be tough to convince the jury of this? Because look, how many cases do we hear about a significant other killing their partner, their ex, their estranged? It happens all the time. To say that there's this other guy that came in, that this young daughter was maybe involved, do you think that's going to be hard to convince the jury?
For
you.
Well, I mean, it is what it is. I can't change the facts. This young lady's going to get up there and she's going to say, this is what happened. Now there's no DNA, there's no tangible evidence, there's no forensics, nothing that links Laurie to this crime. And so really the state's case is just going to be on an attempt to make a disparaging character of Ms. Shaver. That's what their case is going to be, really, to say this was improper or this was improper, these type of innuendos to try to jump to the next conclusion and say, thus Laurie Shaver murdered Michael Shaver. Well, that's going to be a pretty big burden, really.
And just to clarify this one point, it's the obligation of the prosecution to not really seek a conviction, but to seek justice in a manner. If they have exculpatory evidence, they have to turn it over. If they find evidence that your client is innocent, this changes the game. I'm still confused, I guess, by the role of the court here. They're just letting both sides work it out without getting involved and saying, wait a minute, we have a serious issue of a witness who's claiming that her mother wasn't responsible for this. We have evidence to show, and the court's saying, we'll just allow it to see what happens at trial?
Well, to an extent, there's been motions that have been filed in the case and some rulings at this stage, but the judge cannot substitute the court's judgment for that of a jury when it comes to questions of fact. So, while I wish the judge may, but we got to sit back and let some things unfold.
Speaking of that, there were a number of motions that you recently argued to the court. You wanted the court to exclude all reference to firearms. The state, though, said, the state attorney actually said that the bullet that was found in Mr. Shaver's skull is a .38 caliber, and the firearm that Mrs. Shaver used to own the pink revolver was the type of firearm that could, in fact, fire a .38 caliber projectile, which is consistent with what was found in Mr. Shaver's head. What did the judge decide there, and what did you make of the prosecution's argument?
I thought the argument was literally pretty lame. I mean, that's like saying, the defendant was traveling in a Dodge Ram or something like that. And thus there was a Dodge Ram involved in this case. There's case law explicitly on that in cases Agathis. And in that case, the state was allowed to discuss sale of guns that occurred at a distant point in time. And that case got reversed. So I was a little surprised that the judge would even entertain that prospect, but we'll see. We'll see where it ends up.
So the judge is allowing that evidence to come in?
I'm not definitively sure. Of course, you get into trial and there's going to be an objection. We'll see how the state tries to link it up. All evidence has to be probative of a material fact. Now, I don't know where the state thinks they're going with it. I don't know where
they're saying that the bullet that was found or allegedly found in his skull is consistent with the firearm that she may have owned at one point. And if it seems like the state would have an opportunity to argue that.
Well, the point is there's no ballistics that link up any projectile to any particular gun. So to say, hey, we got a projectile and it's of a .38 caliber. I mean, my word, how many millions of .38 calibers are there out there? And how do you link it to that particular gun on any particular date?
It's an interesting argument. There was also this effort, to not allow evidence in of signed checks and signed postcards. The state says it was to show a timeline of the events in this case, but you disagree, right?
Yeah, I disagree. One, the state doesn't have really, they're trying to narrow down a timeline for their convenience, as opposed to using the information on the charging document. When they need to try to narrow things down, then they try to say, it's relevant to establishing a timeline. Well, that's not the case. They're bound by the information, and the state just wants to kind of shift gears and then try to persuade the court that they're doing it under a different auspice, and that's not the motive.
What do you think the prosecution really wants that in for?
Just really to prejudice the jury in any way they can.
How so? What would it show in the what are they thinking? Or again, what is your interpretation of what the prosecution is hoping that would show the jury that you say is unfair?
What reference to what?
The signed checks, the postcards, what do you think the real motive of the prosecution is? What are they trying to establish there?
Anything that will prejudice the jury.
Okay.
Anything that they can argue this was from Laurie or this was for this purpose or that purpose. Now, I understand, what they're trying to do. I don't know if the state is aware of other people that may have done some of those things.
And my final question to you before I let you go is, what kind of jury are you going to be looking for in a case like this?
A fair jury, really a fair jury. I don't want some wild, renegade jury. Just want somebody that's really willing to follow the law. If you're willing to sit down and impose the law pursuant to the standards that are imposed by law, then Laurie's got a good chance. Because if you're just going to get angry and try to reach a verdict based on anger, I think that's what the state's motive is. Try to find a jury that may be angry and upset, as opposed to a jury that's wanting to follow the law and impose the standards.
Mm-hmm. And sorry, one more question before I let you go. I was just thinking about this, and you probably won't know the answer because it's not your decision. But has Laurie given you any indication that she would like to testify, to take the stand, to explain her side of the story about what happened?
That's always a decision that the clients.
Right.
I don't really interfere with that. I'll advise her as to my feelings or impressions about it. Let her make that decision. But I think maybe she'll just make that decision at trial.
Yep.
She may testify, she may not. I'll have some clients sometimes that'll testify. Sometimes some of them are too nervous to testify. And so we'll see. We'll see what she wants to do at trial.
It all depends. It all depends on seeing how the case goes. Jeffrey Wiggs, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate your perspective and telling us what's going on. Appreciate it.
Okay, my pleasure.
All right, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.